Welcome to the Fearlessly Inspired podcast. We are two military veterans ready to lead, empower, and inspire women in all areas of life. We are proof that your past doesn't have to define you and your circumstances don't have to hold you back. We are your hosts, Courtney and Barbara. Welcome to the show.
Welcome back, listeners. We're so excited to have you back with us today. And if this is your first time, welcome to our show. Today's episode is going to be about setting the tone for others. The conversation or the relationship that you potentially have with yourself really sets the tone on how other conversations and relationships that you might have, with other people or in the future. Potentially what we're saying is if you don't really care or respect yourself, then how can you really expect others to do the same? And at the end of the day, you really determine, how you'll allow others to treat you. So, let's kind of jump into the conversation.
Let's do it.
Good morning, because we're here, we're ready to go, right? In your opinion or experience, what are some reasons why you let others treat or talk to you in a negative way?
I think it really goes back to your own personal self-esteem and confidence issues. And those issues usually stem from either like how you grew up or possibly like maybe a relationship in your early adulthood that maybe projected or maybe lowered your self-esteem or self-confidence, right? So basically, like an example would be like if you never heard growing up as a kid, like positive, what is it called? Like positive affirmations, or just like somebody that was really, maybe a parent that was really affectionate, or somebody that was always saying, you're beautiful, or I love you. And a lot of kids never received I love you as a kid, when they were young, especially in different cultures, that's not something that parents do. Right. So like for me, like thinking back about it, I don't think that my family was super emotional like that. They weren't super affectionate. I don't remember that. I mean, I remember my dad definitely always telling me that I was beautiful. But I don't really remember a lot of people in my family being super affectionate. I remember when you say goodbye to your aunts and uncles or your grandparents, you gave them a hug goodbye. But other than that, like, I don't remember anybody in my family being super affectionate. I actually remember my aunt, like if you got hurt, she would say, oh, there's no blood, get up, keep going. You know what I mean? Like where today, you would probably sit there with your daughter and be like, oh, it's okay. Like, don't worry. It's just a little scratch. You know what I mean? And like kind of talk her through the pain, or talk her through the experience. But yeah, I wasn't really like that as a kid. And, now that I'm a little bit older, it seems like my mom has become more affectionate, or tries to be. But I really think how your upbringing is going to kind of stem into how your self-confidence and your self-esteem is as you grow up. And obviously a lot of other things happen throughout your life that may increase that or decrease that.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I think about what you were just saying about with my daughter the other night. Just happened to be that I was in the shower and I hear her like screaming as if like she injured herself, and I'm like, what's going on? And I'm yelling for my husband, and our responses are so very different, where I'm like, hey, are you okay? Are you okay? What's wrong? And he's like, what happened? And I'm like, no, make sure she's okay.
Right.
I mean, maybe that's just, a difference between a mother and a father, how we react. But, my little one, she hurts herself all the time. So at some point you're just like, what happened now? Sometimes
right.
you just do that. But she did hurt herself, and so like I was trying to call to her, and, he's still trying to figure out what happened. So I like jump out of the shower and I'm like, here, just give her to me,
Mm-hmm.
like I'll talk her down off the ledge because she's still screaming. So it's just funny how you kind of say that. But I agree 100%, growing up, me and my cousins were very affectionate. I feel like that was always there. But, going to sleep or, whatever, like I never heard, I love you, or, sweet dreams or any of that. Like, I don't remember that kind of stuff.
Yeah, me neither.
And, even to this day, when I talk to my dad, depending if I'm talking to him by himself or if I'm talking to him with others, he'll be like, I love you, and so it's, but I think that's more of a culture thing. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know, but I've just learned to not really expect it. But if I hear it, obviously, it's nice to hear. But
And, not that it's an excuse, but, different generations, if your parents didn't receive that from their parents, then it may be foreign to them. And, even though maybe you didn't receive it, you're trying to change how you respond to your kids because of you reflect back on what your experiences with your parents.
I would, and I believe I've said this in other podcasts, the way that I parent my kids are very different. And it's more of, I try to incorporate a lot of the things that I wanted as a kid,
Right.
the things that I felt I needed as a kid, whether it's true that they need it or they don't. I just feel like there was a gap for me. And I try to make sure that, those things that I wanted as a little girl,
Right.
that I do make sure that, I say them to my kids, or I, try to be there in that way. So I
Yeah.
agree.
So do you think that a person's lack of self-confidence can affect others or be seen by others? Like, for example, if someone gives you a compliment, are you the type of person to say thank you? Or do you respond with a negative comment about yourself? Like, I think that's a good example. Like, how can that be seen by others?
Oh, for sure. I would tell you I'm guilty. I've been very guilty of that on multiple occasions, where if somebody gives me a compliment, let's say they're like, "Oh, I like your outfit." Instead of saying thank you, I'm like, "Oh, well, I got it for this place." And I try to justify, maybe like, "Oh, I got it for $5, and that's why, I have this cute outfit." Like, I don't, what I'm saying? Or if somebody's like, "Oh, you're pretty," you're like, "Oh man, my hair's so messy today." No, I'm totally guilty of that. And I feel like, in hindsight, it definitely showed my lack of confidence, or that maybe I wasn't really used to hearing those things. And so it made me feel awkward, at some point.
Right. I think you hit the nail on the head there. Is like I think a lot of people feel awkward because it's not something they've heard.
Right.
And so,
And, I think of some, people that I've talked to recently, when you're trying to compliment them, they're trying to find something to kind of downplay what you just said to them.
mhm,
I think it happens very often.
mhm.
Um, honestly, I think it's just, sometimes it just becomes out of habit. Even if you become very confident in yourself, I have to catch myself to intentionally not to do those things sometimes.
and
So,
and so that how you respond to something as simple as a compliment actually can be perceived by others, because if you hear somebody do that now, now that we're kind of aware of it, right? Like it shows others how you perceive yourself.
right, absolutely. I mean, you think about, like, let's say I'm, not you, you're talking to somebody who, they're not very confident. You're trying to compliment them to kind of boost their confidence. You know what I'm saying? Not that you don't mean it, but you're intentionally doing it to help them. And just kind of watch their body language, or, you kind of listen to their response. It gives you a perception of, oh, well, I need to say this more often to them, because they're
Hmm.
not very confident in what you're trying to say. Obviously, being in a health and fitness, accountability group, you're often, trying to compliment people, and you can really tell based on their responses how they feel, about themselves. Like, "Oh, I need to lose 5 more pounds. I'm not really where I want to be. I need to try harder." And so it just really generates that, it acknowledges that they're not very confident right now.
So if one
Or
of our listeners what is one of those people who always have something negative to say when given a compliment, what advice would you give for them to try to stop that?
Well, like I said, we're both guilty, right? We're all guilty of this. And you have to be intentional about it to change that mindset, to be honest, because, it doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen for many of us. And so, if you are aware that you're that person
Hmm.
that does that, you have to almost intentionally, okay, if somebody gives me a compliment, I need to, like, take a second to think about that and respond with something positive, to
Hmm.
kind of that mindset. Because it seems petty or little, or however you want to say it, but honestly, that's the best way to go about it. Because if you don't become intentional about, talking good about yourself, you're always going to just generate the first, diarrhea,
Negative.
negative thing that comes out. But in order to change that, you have to start to be intentional about it.
Right.
So that would be my advice.
I think that's good advice. And then maybe just repeating the, like, if I say, hey, Barbara, you're beautiful, and maybe just repeating that affirmation in your head back to yourself. Like, I am beautiful.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Maybe, and if somebody says that to you, and you don't necessarily believe it, maybe one of the best things to do is go write it down and say, I'm beautiful, put it on the mirror. And, until you have repeated that on so many levels and occasions. I mean, if you look at my desk right now, I have so many affirmations that, especially in regards to my business, like I just believe that, I need to change that. So I totally like that one about writing it down.
Cool.
Let me ask you, Courtney, when, we're talking about low self-esteem and confidence, do you think that potentially when we have that low self-esteem or lack of confidence that we're attracting people with that similar, like very like-minded kind of people like that?
Yeah. And I think if you put off a vibe of low self-confidence and low self-esteem, other people may kind of like, it's like a magnet, like, well, she's kind of like me, she doesn't really, put off this confidence vibe, you know what I mean? Because if there was somebody with low confidence or low self-esteem, right, and you put them in a room with somebody that was similar to them, right, or somebody that's like the center of attention and beautiful or whatever, they're more likely going to avoid the person that they feel intimidated by, right? And so the other and you can kind of see people that, the person in the back of the room that, is hunched over, is trying to avoid eye contact, So I think that people find comfort in like-minded people, even if it is on the other side of the seesaw, right? And so, and which is sad because, when you put too many like-minded people that have that low self-esteem and low confidence together, they may feed off of each other. That, I don't want to say it's negativity, but it is kind of like, negative self-image and, negative self-confidence and esteem image can feed off each other. And so, and which is,
to even put it maybe in a little more lively approach here, you think about addicts, somebody who has an addiction, they hang out with other people who have addictions, and until they realize it's no longer good for them, they're there, and they continue just to thrive with those other people who are addicted to something.
And how do you expect to change yourself if you surround yourself with people that are talking badly about themselves as well?
Right.
So it's the same, definitely the same scenario, right? So, we talked a little bit about, people that lack confidence and lack self-esteem, but do you think confident people respond differently to someone that's less confident? Maybe and we can kind of change it a little because either it could be like a positive compliment, or it could be like, do confident people respond differently to negative comments? Because we're talking about setting the tone for others. And so if others are speaking to you negatively, how is a confident person versus a non-confident person going to respond?
Well, I think it depends on the situation, right? I think with, if you're somebody who's truly confident in yourself, right? And somebody, gives you a positive comment, you're potentially going to say, thank you, I appreciate the comment, and maybe even, say something positive back to them. But let's say somebody comments maybe with a negative comment, or maybe potentially on a sexual harassment level, right? Let's just, use that as an example. We've seen it happen. You've been in your, work environment, mine. We've all been a part of this, where somebody will make a compliment like, oh, those jeans look really nice on you.
Mm-hmm.
And it's coming from a more derogatory approach.
Right.
And so it's not your girlfriend saying, oh, I really like those jeans on you.
Right. It's a stranger you work with.
This perfect stranger who's kind of maybe eyeballing you in a certain way. And you kind of look at them. I think as a confident person, you're going to kind of, depending on the situation, you may be like, you know what, you're not worth my time. I'm not even going to have this conversation with you. And you're going to be like, thanks, and walk away. Where The flip side of that could be like, look, you know, you're going to stand up for yourself and be like, hey, I think that's kind of inappropriate. Like, I don't know you like that.
Right.
And you know, I can tell you that for most people, if they don't know me and say something like that, they don't know what's coming, you know, after that.
Right. For sure.
You know, obviously you don't want to just flip off your lid automatically. And so, you know, you have to kind of play that out. But I think as a confident person, sometimes you're just like, look, I'm not even going to waste my time. And that's okay. And you're not going to let it eat you up inside or in where somebody who lacks that confidence, if somebody says that to them, they're going to be like, he, you know, it's negative attention, but you know, I'll take it.
Mm-hmm. And I just, you know, I think we might have like kind of confused the conversation might have changed a little bit, you know, because we were talking about positive, you know, low self-esteem. And that's kind of like, if you have low self-esteem, it might change how you respond to certain situations. Right. And so now I think we've kind of changed the topic a little bit to say, okay, what you do or don't do sets the tone for how others treat you. So we're kind of like shifted a little bit to say, okay, now that negative person or that low self-esteem person and a confident person receive the same a negative comment, how do they respond? And so just so the listeners kind of understand that we're shifting a little bit, because the whole topic is setting the tone for others. And if you don't respect yourself, then how do you expect somebody else to treat you like an upstanding, you know,
Right.
person? So I definitely think that when we don't talk about something, when we don't address a negative comment, or we allow somebody to continue to speak negatively about us or to us, it's all going to depend on what kind of person you are in the situation. But when we allow somebody to talk a certain way to us and we don't shut it down, we're saying it's okay.
Right. And, you know, if for somebody who maybe lacks a little bit of confidence and somebody says something like that, you could go to bed still thinking about it at night,
I
you know,
have.
and it becomes, you know, internal to you. And then it just creates that sense of like, oh, is this right? Do what they're saying to me, I should just accept it. Or, you know, maybe I'm not a confident person. And that's not true, you know, it's just that happened and you just have to, you know, shut it down. You know, if you
Right.
don't feel comfortable, make sure that you know, you don't have to be a butthead about it. You know what I'm saying? You can do it in a polite way, like, hey, I don't appreciate that. And if it continues or it escalates, well, then there's other things to do. But, you know, just some random stranger makes a comment to you, you know, you have to be able to be like, hey, bro, like,
That's inappropriate.
it's inappropriate. Don't like it. I don't know you. Or if I do know you, it doesn't matter. You know? So, Courtney, you know, obviously, you know, in our professions, we're the ratio from male to female is very different. And so, you know, and then obviously in your current career, you know, you probably see it a whole lot more often than I do right now. But do you think that fear may drive potentially the way that others talk to you, or I'm sorry, do you think that fear may drive the way that we allow others to talk or treat us in our professional settings?
Yes, absolutely. And, you know, like you said, like I've been in, you know, law enforcement for 20 years and working cases, you know, that are similar to sexual harassment or, you know, not sexual harassment, but the elevation of that. Right. And so I think you can definitely see in the military where I think some of the like higher up people and like look at the ladder, right? You know, somebody that's above you in either rank or position. You know, there's some brave people out there that will talk down to you and say things to you that are inappropriate because they think that you're not going to say anything, right? So that's why, and I've seen sexual harassment in the military and within the civilians in the military. Believe me, the old timers in the military, the civilian old timers, they are quick to say something that's inappropriate to somebody that's their subordinate, you know,
Right.
because the different generations, you know, there's,
Right.
you know, let's be honest, there was a time where women were not going to speak up and stick up for themselves
Right.
because, you know, that voice was hushed. And so absolutely. So yeah, there you have to stand up for yourself. And because if you don't, even in the military world, like if you don't, things can escalate and you just reinforce the behavior of that person, and they think that it's okay to say something again and again and again, to the point where there's fear, you
Right.
know, to say something. Well, what if I say something and nobody believes me? Or what if I say something and I get counseled, or I get reprimanded, or I don't get a position or a school? You know what I mean? So there's so many different things that somebody above you, one of your supervisors, has control over, and there could, you know, there could be threats.
Right.
So like it just could go on and on and on. This could be a topic, a whole nother topic. But I absolutely think that fear of what could happen if I say something or I report something could happen to me if I say something. So instead, most people just kind of stay silent and think that it's going to stop or go away.
Right.
Um, so to shift the conversation a little bit, because you can obviously hear in my voice that, you know, this is a topic that I'm passionate about. But I think there are times, Barbara, where we are maybe young and we accept negative attention as attention. So have you ever accepted that negative attention or negative affection from somebody else in a place of, okay, well, it's just, even though it's negative, it's something that I desire or want, so I'm just going to let it go?
You know, I would say absolutely. And it's funny because you say, you know, that we're young, right? Um, and I think we should replace that with young minded. Like we're not in a place where, you know, we've grown in a sense of
Right.
who we want to be, you know? And so, but you know, for the fact that you said young minded, the first thing that comes to my mind is, you know, I think of kids, right? When you have multiple kids potentially, or even one, you know, some kids, when they're not getting whatever attention it is that they desire, potentially there becomes some, you know, maybe issues with them, the way their behavior or whatever, and they start to accept that negative attention, you know, whether it's their parents screaming at them or, you know, potentially abusing them, but to them it's attention. And
Mm-hmm.
so, you know, I think of, you know, that's the first thing when you ask me that question that kind of comes to my mind. But, you know, even as an adult, you know, I think, you know, I think, you know, right after my divorce, you know, how many years ago? 15 plus years ago already.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, I think about after my divorce, you know, mentally I just wasn't in a good place. And so, you know, I was in a relationship where I accepted you know, this attention that wasn't probably the best for me. It wasn't healthy
Right.
because it was attention. You know, I was in it.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, it wasn't until, you know, in hindsight that I was just like, I can't do this anymore. Like I felt, you know, I was losing myself. And, you know, I think about even potentially, you know, just in general, like sometimes, you know, when we're working or something, we can't meet those expectations, or, you know, from our subordinates, as you were talking about before, you know, and we're like, well, at least, you know, they're giving us some attention. And, you know, we shouldn't be thriving off of the negativity. You know, we should be thinking of the ways that we really want to have that positivity coming into us. And so, but, you know, again, I'm guilty. You know, I've definitely taken negative attention. I think even as a kid, you know, my brothers were always in trouble. And so like attention was always in their court. And for me, you know, I always tried to be, and this is the opposite, right? I tried to be the perfect little kid, quote unquote, not get in trouble, like do everything I had to do because you know, I always saw how much attention they were getting. So I tried to do the opposite. But, you know, and I tried to give myself that positive approach, you know, try to flip it. But, you know, still it was like, well, you need to do this better, or you need to do that better, or you can do this better. Like, you know, you're always striving to do something more, but you're like, well, at least, you know, in my mind at that age, like, okay, well, they're giving me some feedback, even though it's probably not the best positive feedback.
No, absolutely. And, you know, I've talked about my own personal experience on previous episodes, but, you know, for a long time, and, you know, I'm still not sure if it stems from, you know, my relationship with my dad and how that kind of didn't end on great circumstances. But, you know, for a long time, you know, I craved attention, and then I got that attention from locations or people that were not good for me at all, you know? And so because I was mistaking like a sexual relationship for love and emotions and attention, and if as long as I got something, my cup was in my brain, you know, my cup was filled, like, oh, this is the attention that I crave, even though it's not healthy at all, right? And so it wasn't until but I was blind to what I was doing because I was so young, and, you know, I wasn't mature, and I didn't see things from the outside. I was just surviving, I think. And
Oh,
so it wasn't until, you know, much older, you know, that I realized what I was doing, and I tried it, you know, I've tried to break that cycle, just, but it all thrives off of, you know, I don't want to say low self-confidence, but one, just not knowing yourself and not knowing what you're doing, and just being blind to something that you've done multiple times, and then realizing, hey, like, this isn't healthy for me. This isn't what I deserve. I deserve more than this for myself. And so,
well, you know, I think you said it earlier, Courtney, you know, you don't think you have a voice, you know, and sometimes, you know, it's just as simple as that. Like if I speak up, you know, there's going to be worse consequences. And so your voice is kind of taken away from you, and you don't feel like you can speak up for yourself. And, you know, I
or you
think
don't
that
know
often,
how to stand up for yourself. You don't know how to make the right choices, and I'm trying to think of the word, like, demand respect, like demand the right attention, demand somebody to treat you how you should be treated. Because at that time, like, maybe I didn't really know like what it was to be treated by somebody, or what love was, or, you know, what a relationship was. And so I chose something that was available.
and, you know, just for our listeners to put a little perspective, you know, Courtney's almost 40.
Mm-hmm.
I'm over, you know, I'm going to be 41 this year. So, you know, this isn't something that we were able to do, you know, umpteen years ago. This is something we're just now, you know, getting comfortable in our own selves to do, and really understand who we are and what it is that we really do demand. And so, and that's not, you know, like it's only my way or the highway kind of demand. It's just understanding who we are, what our desires are, and, you know, what we want in our future, you know, the way. And again, you know, the whole topic is setting the tone for others. And so, you know, I think that, you know, we're just learning how to set the tone for others, because we've
Absolutely.
allowed a lot of things to happen over the past, you know, umpteen years. And now is when we're just starting to get our voice for ourselves.
Absolutely. And so, in closing, you know, it doesn't matter what age you are. You just have to self-reflect and look at what your experiences, look at your life, look at your relationships, and look at yourself in the mirror, and literally say, am I doing what I need to do in order for people to treat me the way I expect them to treat me? And if I don't respect myself, how can I expect others to respect me? And how you're, you know, exactly everything that we've talked about, like how our personal self-esteem and confidence is reflected out towards others and how they might perceive it. So just take a look at yourself and just realize that at any age you can turn the tables, and you can make better decisions for yourself, and you can learn to be confident and increase your self-esteem, but you have to put in the work. So thank you guys for listening. We hope you found some kind of value from this podcast. And if you know anybody out there that may need to hear this message, you know, don't feel free to share it with them, because somebody out there does not know that we're having these hard conversations, and they may need to hear it. So we also hope you'll join us on our next podcast. And don't forget, you can also follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Fearlessly Inspired Podcast.